The iPhone XS was the flagship iPhone of 2018, refining a pretty controversial phone, and in the process, making one of my favorite iPhones in years. However, 1 year later, Apple released the iPhone 11, a partially redesigned iPhone with a slightly different look, more camera features, and better battery life. So, which of these two phones should you buy in 2021? Let's find out. First off, as usual, we're going to be taking a look at the specs. At first glances, we have an incremental upgrade from the A12 Bionic processor on the iPhone XS to the A13 Bionic processor on the iPhone 11. And we're going to be talking more about what this means as well as how this performs later on. But for now, they both have 4GB of RAM, multiple storage options, the iPhone XS having 64, 256, and 512GB, whereas the iPhone 11 has the, in my opinion, more useful 64, 128, and 256GB of internal storage. As I said, I personally think this is a little bit more useful, seeing as a lot of people like that 128GB middle option. Not to say 512GB isn't useful, but I've met a lot more people who own the 128GB version compared to the 512GB version. The iPhone XS weighs in at 177 grams, whereas the iPhone 11 weighs in at 194 grams. So heavier, but it's larger, so this is to be expected, and both come in multiple color options, with the XS sticking with the more traditional colors, so space gray, silver, and gold, whereas the iPhone 11 has some pretty cool, funky color options. As for the specs, that's pretty much it. As always with iPhone, specs really aren't the best way of measuring performance, so we are going to be talking about specifically performance later, but for now, how's the build quality? So in terms of design and build quality, they're both pretty similar on paper. I mean, they're both made out of glass and metal, whereas with the iPhone XS, you get stainless steel, and on the iPhone 11, you get 7000 series aluminium. Both feel nice, although I am definitely a sucker for that stainless steel look, so that's a consideration. Both also feature an IP68 water resistance rating, which is nice to see, meaning that if you accidentally get either of these phones wet, there shouldn't be a huge problem. However, try to avoid soaking them and make sure that they're not submerged for more than 30 minutes. Also, if we look to the cameras of each of these phones, we can see that it was redesigned on the iPhone 11. I personally don't have a preference when it comes to the looks of this, but it's worth noting. Overall, while both of these phones are nicely designed and they both look stunning, I'd still definitely recommend keeping a case on these, because glass back, breaking it, recipe for an unhappy wallet. Following on, we have the screen, and here there are definitely some pretty notable differences. While the iPhone XS has that 5.8-inch OLED panel with a resolution of 1125 by 2436, the iPhone 11 has a 6.1-inch LCD screen with a resolution of 828 by 1792. Honestly, I can definitely see the difference here, and in terms of personal comfort, as someone with pretty small hands, the iPhone XS is definitely more comfortable for me to hold. Overall, the XS does just look more contrasty and sharper than the iPhone 11, especially up close. However, at arm's length, I've never really had any problem with either. They're both bright enough to be used in any lighting condition. I've never really found myself wanting more sharpness from the iPhone 11 in day-to-day use, but it must be said, all things considered, I do still prefer the iPhone XS in this regard. Both feature True Tone to keep your colors nice and balanced in all lighting conditions, and as always, there is a secondary interaction method. With the XS, it's the pressure-based 3D touch, whereas with the 11, it's the newer and standard now either on the newer high-end models, time-based haptic touch. Honestly, with all these software updates, I can't really tell the difference, and both work fine. So while 3D touch will always have a very special place in my heart, both are very nice to have. Overall, it is a pretty clear victory for the XS here. The flagships of these eras did get a better screen, and still to this day, I do prefer the iPhone XS's screen to the 11's. That said, if you do want that bigger size and you aren't a nerd for the OLED panel like I am, the iPhone 11 is certainly pretty nice as well. Next up, we have the button layout. While there are certainly subtle design language changes between each of these phones, most notably, as I said, the camera on the iPhone 11, here it's pretty much the same. A nice big isolated lock button, separate volume up and down buttons, a mute switch, and a notch. Now, I must say that in my experience, the aluminium bezel iPhones do tend to have a bit more tactility in their buttons, but all things considered, both still do work pretty nicely. Leading on, we have the Face ID, and again, there is a clear difference. While both do work nicely in all lighting conditions, it must be said that the iPhone 11 was where we saw the first real improvement on the Face ID technology since the iPhone 10. Don't get me wrong, the iPhone XS was certainly faster than the iPhone 10, especially at launch, but software updates have kind of bridged this now, and seeing as you have so many more angles that you can unlock your phone from with the iPhone 11, it is a definitive victory for the iPhone 11. Up next, we have one of my favorite things to talk about: the camera. While both are dual camera systems, there are certainly a few changes, and not just a redesigned lens element. The iPhone XS features a standard 12 megapixel wide angle with an aperture of f1.8, along with a 12 megapixel f2.4 telephoto lens, which I make no secret of being a huge fan of. Yeah, still got kind of a soft spot for that focal length. The iPhone 11, on the other hand, has a very similar on-paper 12 megapixel f1.8 wide angle, but it swaps out the telephoto lens for a 12 megapixel f2.4 ultra wide lens. The front-facing camera also got an upgrade, going from 7 megapixels f2.2 to 12 megapixels f2.2, along with some new pretty cool under the hood upgrades. But how's the performance? I have very much enjoyed using the iPhone XS. Dynamic range is great, the multiple focal lengths are nice for some alternative angles, and while not perfect, it certainly is a nice camera system. Dynamic range, saturation, and sharpness are all good, and for the casual photographer, it'll do just fine. The iPhone 11, on the other hand, has significantly better dynamic range, sharpness, and saturation, thanks to, in part, that A13 Bionic processor, and it also brings along night mode for some extra crispy low light shots. One of my personal favorite features introduced in this line of iPhone. It does only work on the wide angle camera, which is fine by me, and all in all, it is certainly a cool feature. Both also feature portrait mode, which works well. I personally prefer the more compressed look that you can get out of the iPhone XS due to how different focal lengths work, but it works nicely on both. Now, while focal lengths are subjective, I do have to say most people do prefer that ultra wide angle. So it is nice that it has been included here on the iPhone 11. You can get some of those really nice dramatic landscape shots. And overall, the camera system does seem to have been improved. Briefly going over the front-facing camera, it is again slightly improved on the iPhone 11 with better dynamic range, more resolution, but realistically, it's a selfie cam. How good does it really need to be? Still, nice that it's been improved. In terms of video, the iPhone 11 also got a nice upgrade here too. Both shoot 4K at up to 60 FPS on their main cameras, but instead of just 1080p 60 FPS on the front-facing camera, like on the XS, the iPhone 11 brought 4K to the front-facing camera for the first time, which is honestly awesome. And it makes getting some of those nice-looking vlogging angles on the most obvious lens for the job much easier. There is also notably extended dynamic range on the iPhone 11 in video, and while you do lose this at 60 FPS in 4K on the front-facing camera, it is still a nice addition. Both also feature slow motion 1080p at up to 240 FPS, and while this isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination on either, both will certainly get the job done for some fun casual slow motion. And yeah, in terms of video, overall, the iPhone 11 does certainly seem to be the winner here. So to wrap things up, cameras do seem to be getting better and better on phones each year, and how much of this is hype I can leave up to you. But here, the difference is very real. Dynamic range is better on the iPhone 11, you get a focal length that most people, as I said, do prefer, and improved video. So overall, a definitive victory for the iPhone 11. Following on, we have another very important area: OS and app performance. The iPhone 11 was obviously released a year later than the XS, so it's very likely it will get a bonus year of support, but seeing as the iPhone XS was released in 2018 and iPhones typically do get a very long support cycle, neither phones are going anywhere anytime soon. On both phones, scrolling through the OS, opening up stock apps, and performing system functions like the secondary interaction method all feel great on both, which is nice. However, again, due to the longer lifespan, I would expect this to stay good for longer on the iPhone 11. In terms of more intensive performance, when it comes down to gaming, the iPhone 11 is certainly going to be the better option thanks to that A13 processor, but honestly, when watching videos, I have to say I prefer the iPhone XS. That nicer, higher resolution OLED screen really does bring videos to life. It never stutters or lags, and that better screen really does come into play. So realistically, both are pretty good. However, again, I would expect the iPhone 11 to stay good for a little bit longer. Alright, so next up, and I'm not sure why I do these videos in this order, but I do. We have these speakers. The iPhone 11 actually introduced spatial audio playback, which was nice as it does help audio feel just a little bit wider and more immersive. Both also feature that stereo technology that we first saw introduced in the iPhone 7, and on both it seems to be balanced pretty nicely, which is always good to know. I personally love using my phone speakers to add music to basically any menial task that I'm doing without having to grab any external equipment like this. This is just a piece of audio equipment I have on my desk. It's not used for listening, it's for recording. Finally, we have the battery life. The iPhone XS features a battery capacity of 2,658 milliamp hours, whereas the iPhone 11 features a battery capacity of 3,110 milliamp hours. The iPhone 11 is truly stunning in this regard. I never find it running out throughout the day. In fact, my brother uses this phone and he's used it for 2 days without it running out of battery. With the iPhone XS, it does usually get me through the day, but I occasionally need to plug it in during the evenings, which I personally don't mind, but this is still important to mention. Yeah, overall, the iPhone 11 does definitely win in this category. Okay, so all these things considered, which of these phones should you buy? Well, honestly, it depends what you want. Do you want to be able to get a new phone at a decent price with some of the best battery life I've ever experienced? Then it's definitely worth taking a look at the iPhone 11. But if you don't mind buying used, you want a better screen, and like me, you are still a sucker for that telephoto lens, then it's definitely worth taking a look into the iPhone XS. Alright guys, so that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know, by the way, which of these phones do you prefer? Do you prefer the XS? Do you prefer the 11? Are you planning to buy either of these phones? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading those. Once again, a huge thank you to my patrons for helping to support this channel. If you want to get bonus videos, awesome wallpaper packs every month, and much more, then feel free to check that out. As for now though, as always, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video if you want to see more content like this, then smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I will see you guys in the next one.